has inspired. Princes clashed with presidents and met with world leaders to convince them to treat climate crisis like the crisis it is.
18-year-old Greta Thunberg temporarily skipped school to travel the world to see firsthand the effect global warming has had on our planet.
Greta Thunberg joins us now live from Stockholm. A very good morning to you. It's a thrill to have you on the show. What's fascinating about this documentary is that, of course, we've seen the outward version of what you've been doing for a long time now. But what we haven't seen, and what this documentary does do, is show us from the inside your point of view, through your eyes, what the last year has been like, or the last year and a half. For you, what comes across in some of the bits, and I've seen some of the documentary, is that you have this incredible flame lit inside of you, which you perhaps don't quite understand either, where it's come from, why you feel this way so strongly. And also, as you said in that clip there, why you've had this extraordinary effect on the world. Is that too much, in a way, for a young girl like you to really consider? Or have you thought about why it is you, particularly, talking about the environment, has had this enormous impact on governments, on all of us?
Well, to be honest, I don't really understand it either. It's very strange. And when I started school striking, I hadn't expected really anything. So just anything that happened would have been a surprise. But then something like this happened, and it just spiraled out of what was reasonable. And it was something that no one could have predicted, I think. But I actually, now when I look back, I'm very surprised that the attention has stayed on for so long, that people have been kept on listening to what I'm saying for so long. I thought people would get tired of me after just a few months, but strangely enough, people are still listening, and I have no idea why that is. I'm not that unique of a person, but I guess it was just the right thing for someone to do at the right time, and people were ready for that kind of thing, I guess.
Yeah.
And then one led to another, and then, I mean, it's not me who have done this. I have done this together with millions of other young people all around the world.
Yeah, interestingly, of course, Greta, you took, for the purposes of the, not for the purposes of the documentary, but as the documentary follows you, you actually take a year out of school to travel around the world and try and understand firsthand. I mean, we talk about this and we see you in various locations, but from the people who are directly affected by climate change. I wonder, what were those moments like for you, meeting the reindeer farmers and meeting the Polish miners and all of these other extraordinary characters, not all of whom, of course, agreed with your perspective on climate change, but what was it like for you to go through that?
It was an incredible experience, and I'm so grateful to have experienced all this and to have seen this from so many different perspectives. Everything from visiting and standing on a glacier, which they say this cannot no longer be saved, and I mean things like that. It's just things that you don't really get to experience, and it gets, of course, it makes it feel like it's real in a different way.
And Greta, what's interesting in the documentary is that you talk about, whenever you speak, you know, the headlines are often about, say, perhaps you versus Trump is one of those scenes in the documentary, where I think it's at Davos, where you made this incredible speech, but the words of your speech and the science were not reported, but it was just the fact that you'd ignored him. And what I found was that you are very emotional, actually, in the film. And I wonder whether it's that has captured the emotion, the emotion and the imagination of the world, which is, we've heard the science from academics, but what we don't often get is the tears, actually, and the deep emotion and the empathy that you feel for the unfairness of climate change. That whilst those in wealthy countries, we might be protected in some way, but it is the poorest in the poorest countries who are suffering already, and we just ignore it.
Yes, there are many different aspects to your question, but first of all, I think it's the exact opposite. I think when we talk about climate, we talk maybe sometimes, at least when it comes to me, too much emotions. I mean, media is blowing things out of proportion and is framing me like an emotional, angry teenager, when in fact we should rather be looking at the science. Just like you said, when media reports about my speeches, they only take like these catchy phrases to make click-worthy headlines, instead of actually reporting on what I'm saying and actually reporting on the science. And that's what was why I really wanted to do this documentary, to further dig into it. But also, yes, of course, we focus too much on this part of the world, the, so to speak, global north. We say that the climate crisis will affect our children in the future. But what we tend to forget is that the climate crisis is already having an impact on countless of people who are suffering and dying from the consequences of the climate crisis. So it's a bit strange when we say that, oh, now our children are starting to speak up. People in these parts of the world have been doing that for so long, but we have just not been listening to them because that's. Yeah.
You have this extraordinary platform now, which you are using to the most incredible effect, which is what everybody needs. But there are moments within that where you will lock horns, whether you want to or not, with global leaders. We saw Donald Trump, we saw Putin as well in the documentary talking about you, saying you're very nice, but you're sort of misguided. I mean, interestingly, there has been a lot of sort of talk about how you have dealt with that, because you are just a teenager. I mean, I say just a teenager, but you have so much of your life ahead of you. You're still learning about how life should be done. And you've got, you know, the President of the United States tweeting that you need to sort your anger management out. You need to go to an old-fashioned movie with a friend. You chill, Greta, chill. And at moments like that, of course, I wonder how that makes you feel with regards to what you're trying to do and what you're trying to get across. But then also when brilliantly you were able to respond when, of course, he's demanding a recount on the election, and you throw his words perfectly back to him in exactly the same way that he needs to work on his anger management. Is there a moment of satisfaction for you when you can do something like that?
Well, I mean, I don't see it that way. I don't see it as I want revenge or something. I try as much as I can to not speak about individuals, because that's what they do. They speak about me rather than the climate crisis itself. And if I were to do that too, I would just be like they are. But of course, it is very hilarious when they write and say these kinds of things. It's a very clear sign that they are seeing the climate movement as a threat, and that rather of speaking about the climate crisis itself, they try to move the subject, to shift subject to someone like me, because then it becomes a question about me. Like if the fire alarm comes off or sets off, you start talking about the fire alarm rather than that the house is actually burning.
It's a great metaphor. And Greta, just before we go, can I just ask you, you know, watching the documentary, you know, it is tiring in a way to watch your energy. You have so much focus and so much energy. Are you, and your dad features in it a lot, you do a lot of this on your own now, without him. Are you worried about burning out?
Well, I mean, of course, there's always a risk, but if you take care of yourself and if you take it one day at a time, and if you care about those kinds of things, then, I mean, I don't see a big risk at the moment. As long as I'm doing it because it's fun, then I don't really see a big risk. I also gain lots of energy. I would say I gain more energy than I lose doing this. And of course, I feel good doing this. You feel good when you feel like you're doing something that is meaningful. I know many people who think that the climate crisis is so depressing, and if I were to really understand and to read about it more, I would just become depressed. But I don't know one single person who actually regrets that they read about the climate crisis and that they are now a climate activist. Because more than it gets you depressed, much more than that, 100 times more, I would say, it gets you motivated, because it gives you a meaning in life, and that makes you happy.
Well, incredibly inspiring. Greta, just before we let you go, we're about to speak to the Transport Secretary here for our government in the UK, and we're talking about the opportunity for people to maybe fly away on holiday. I mean, what would be your request to the British government with regards to climate, to our Transport Secretary, to the idea of people being able to get onto aeroplanes and fly to foreign countries? We've all been locked down because of the pandemic, which has an impact on your documentary as well. I wonder what your thoughts might be to them.
Nothing special, really. I mean, to be frank, since the climate crisis doesn't really exist in the public debate and in the media, I mean, why should people not be flying? Why should we not try to compensate for the time that we have lost now during the pandemic? So it's not, I mean, if we are to change these kinds of things, then, or have a different approach, then that needs to come from the public discourse and from the media. We need to start treating the crisis like a crisis, because otherwise, I mean, why should we take climate action? Why should we even care?
Very powerful message, Greta, for us to leave it on. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Your documentary, Greta Thunberg, A Year to Change the World, on BBC One will be available from Monday the 12th of April, 9 p.m. on the iPlayer. It's a gripping documentary.
It is gripping, actually, and you learn a lot. Thank you so much, Greta, for joining us on the programme. I know a lot of people are very excited about hearing you speak this morning, so thank you.